welcome back to the Peter Joe Podcast. This is episode 8, my favorite video games, part 2. If you listen to part 1, you know what we went over already. We pretty much made it up to the year 2000. The last system we covered was the Sega Dreamcast. So today we're going to pick up where we left off last in part 1. If you haven't already listened to part 1, I suggest you go back and listen to it. So like I said, we left off around the year 2000. The Sega Dreamcast came out in 1999. That was the last system that we covered. So today we're going to start with the year 2000 and the PlayStation 2. So the PlayStation 2 released at the turn of the millennium. Us fanboys like to call it the PS2. It followed the formula of the Sega Dreamcast with high-powered graphics. This was the first PlayStation console to have dual analog sticks, which was very helpful for first-person shooters, like Call of Duty and all that. PS2 is actually the highest-selling console of all time to this day, unless the Switch passed it, but I don't believe it did. PS2 is probably up there on the Mount Rushmore of video game consoles. And this was probably the hardest top 3 I had to make for this whole podcast so far because there are so many different classics on the PS2. So without further ado, here's my top 3 PS2 games. So number 1, I have Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. It's a mouthful of a title. So this game, if you're new to Metal Gear Solid, it's like an espionage spy game. This one takes place during Vietnam. It requires you to camouflage yourself, eat snakes for survival, fix your own injuries, and use stealth to take down the enemies. The funniest thing that cracks me up the most about the Metal Gear Solid games is you get this fucking big cardboard box that you could hide under on the fly. So you just tap, like, I think it was a triangle button, and you would hide in this big cardboard box in the middle of the jungle. And the enemies would come up to you and be like, huh? And then most times they would just ignore the box. They'd be like, oh, a box in the jungle, perfectly normal. Or they would kick over the box and discover you, but I just thought that part was ridiculous. And it's still my favorite part of Metal Gear Solid. The story of this game was badass. It also had a cutscene that was well over an hour long, which is insane for a video game. I still think it holds the record for the longest cutscene. But even though the cutscenes were so long, they were really good. They were really, really well written and acted. So we're going to go to number 2 now. My number 2 favorite game on PS2 was Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. Oh, fuck yes. As much as I love GTA 3 and Vice City, those were the previous PS2 GTA games, there was something great about San Andreas. They added live leveling up, for instance. Like if you ran a lot, your character would be ripped. He would have better stamina. And you would gain that like on the fly. If you ran a lot, it would say your stamina bar would go up, your health would go up. But if you sat around, you got fat, you lost stamina, you couldn't jog, or you couldn't run as fast, you couldn't ride a bike as fast. Like, it was really cool for the time. We're talking, like 2001 that it came out, maybe 2000. So it was really ahead of its time. And I think the funniest part was going to a burger joint in the game and just eating a shit ton of burgers. Like some quarter pounders, just stuffing your face with quarter pounders. Your character would get, like, immediately fat after, like, a minute. I always thought that was fun to do, and then go ride a bike and then work out of the gym and get buff again within a couple minutes. The story for the game was really fun. The missions were great. They didn't feel like chores like a lot of games do. The characters were iconic. Like, his family was hysterical. I want to give this game a perfect score, but it's a 9.5 for me just because some of the gameplay issues. But that's most of Rockstar games. Usually the gameplay is subpar. Alright, number 3 is Need for Speed Underground 2. This is up there for one of my favorite racing games of all time. This introduced us to online racing, and my fucking god, did the fans of this game, including me, we loved it. It was such a fun online game. You could show off your beautiful car that you customized. Like, you could put the lights underneath, you could put hydraulics, you could do ground effects, switch up the hood, the exhaust, you could do everything on this. It was just so much fun driving around in our highly customized rides and pulling up to friends or randoms and challenging them to a race on the fly. The customization was so good in this one. It had so many options, like I said. And my go-to car in this game was the Mazda RX-8. Anybody else out there who was my age and played it, I guarantee you they rocked the RX-8 because it was so OP. All right, moving on to 2001. So this is a year after the PS2. This is when Microsoft decided to get into the game. So in 2001, they created the Microsoft Xbox. The system left a huge mark on the video game world. The Xbox was super successful. It produced so many great games. Too many to list, but here's my top 3. So my number 1 is the whole Splinter Cell trilogy. So there was 3 of them. There was just self-titled Splinter Cell, then there was Pandora Tomorrow, and then there was Chaos Theory in order. I love all 3 of these games almost equally. They all played very similar. The basis is you are a spy named Sam Fisher, and you were the greatest spy there ever was. You use your futuristic gear to look under doors, to hack doors, to hack alarms, all that stuff, to hack lights, spotlights to turn them off. Just basically, you would go around disrupting electronics and sneaking up on your enemies without being detected. So what I did, I would just go around, I would shoot out every single light with my silencer, and then I'd put on my night vision and just take everybody out slowly and quietly. Chaos Theory, the one that is my all-time favorite of Splinter Cell. It was the 3rd of the trilogy. That one added multiplayer, and it was the fucking bee's knees. It was spy versus mercenaries. Being the spy was the best. You could hide in shafts and tunnels, and all they equipped you with was, I believe it was a knife and a silenced pistol. But the mercenaries had like big assault rifles and shit like that and a flashlight. But it was just more fun to be a spy. Number 2 is Halo 2. Halo as a series is a staple of the Xbox market. I personally love 2, but I didn't care for the rest of the Halo series. I'll probably get hate for this because I'm just not a big Halo fan. But my family loves Halo. We used to all play together when I was growing up. And they still play the Halo games now, to this day. And they would beat my ass in it right now if I tried to play them. So 2 introduced fans to multiplayer PvP. They had multiplayer in the first one, but it was only on the same console, I believe. Like it was split screen. The weapons in 2 were amazing. The maps were really cool. The online modes were a blast. And the driving was a lot of fun. The driving had a learning curve, but once you learned it was a lot of fun. This game set the scene for what multiplayer games like Modern Warfare are now. For all you kids out there, if it wasn't for Halo, there would probably not be Call of Duty right now. Or at least the setup of it. Number 3, Tomb Raider Legend. This is probably one of the least talked about Tomb Raider games, I would say. But I liked it. This was a retelling of the story of Lara Croft, who has been the main protagonist since the start. It had great puzzles, but a separate story from all the other Tomb Raider games before it. It was actually cool seeing a Tomb Raider game with good graphics at the time, because the first ones were, I love the games, but the graphics were terrible. There were lots of cool areas to explore, like the rest of this Tomb Raider series, and I just really love this one for the original Xbox. So the first part of this lasted 27 minutes. This one's probably going to be longer, so I'm going to cut down my top 3 and just make it my favorite game of those generations now for the remaining systems, just to get this over with quicker, or else I would have to make 3 parts. So the next one is the Nintendo GameCube. This released in 2001, the same year as the Xbox. So if you notice the pattern, a lot of these systems started to release really close together for competition. I mean, that was just a game plan they had. Pardon me, I need a sip of water. Okay, so like I said, the Nintendo GameCube was next. It came out in 2001. Released the same year as the original Xbox. The discs were actually really tiny mini discs. The system itself was a super small cube, hence the name. I love the controller, but the system, in my opinion, it only had a few good games. I think it was honestly the weakest Nintendo system to date. So my favorite game, since I'm cutting it down to 1, not 3, was Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Oh, I fucking love this game. Man, I think I just, yeah, all right. I think I got a little erect there. Anyways, this is my second favorite Zelda game of all time. Fucking love it so much. You play as a super young Link who has to save his sister. You travel from island to island exploring. The game was open world and it had cel-shaded graphics. So it kind of looked like almost like a comic book mixed with a cartoon, which gave it such a cool and unique look. Next is Microsoft Xbox 360. This came out 4 years after the GameCube in 2005. So this was the second system for the Xbox. It is among one of my favorite consoles. The graphics at this time were mesmerizing for the system. This game features my all-time favorite game, Fallout 3. It's not only my favorite 360 game, but it is the GOAT of games for me. So of course this game gets a perfect score for me, 10 out of 10. It takes place in a nuclear wasteland right after a nuclear bomb hits. It's futuristic but old school at the same time. Like it plays like 50s music, like Tony Bennett type shit. Frank Sinatra. It plays like, the soundtrack is fucking amazing. It's all old school lounge music. Because at the time when the bomb hit in the game, it was the 50s. It takes place in Washington, D.C. mainly. There are mutated creatures everywhere. This game, had RPG elements, it had action elements, it had first-person shooter elements. The game had amazingly funny dialogue and characters, and it was super dark and very open, which I love. I love being stuck in the train stations and the subways. So the next system, one of my favorites, probably most people's favorite PlayStation, is the PS3 or PlayStation 3. Came out in 2006. People on the mean streets of Dorkville, we call it the PS3. We don't call it PlayStation 3, we call it PS3. Most people have this as their favorite PlayStation system, like I said. But I mainly prefer the PS2 and PS4 over it, but that's just me. So this system featured my second favorite game of all time, my first favorite for the PS3, and that was BioShock. Fucking love this game. I can't give it enough credit. The premise of the game is so unique and dope. After your boat crashes, you discover a gateway to a sprawling underwater city. This is a huge city. Picture like New York City underwater, or Chicago. This is one of those games you have to play it to understand how perfect the idea of the game was. This is another one of the few 10 out of 10 games for me. Like, I can't even tell you one thing that I don't like about this game at all. It even had an amazing twist at the end. So we're going to fast forward now to 2013. So we're going from 2006 to 2013. This is when the PlayStation 4, or PS4 as we call it, released. This game system design was next level. Like the box for it was fucking awesome. It was just a really cool looking system. The graphics shattered people's peripherals. There are so many great games for the PS4, but my go to this console is The Last of Us 2. This game gets shit on. It's shit on by many fans, and it's beloved by many fans. It's a weird mix of a game. People bash it on the reviews because of the... They kill off the main protagonist, one of the main protagonists right in the beginning, and people went apeshit over this. But us fans, we saw it coming. It was probably deserved. But I just don't care what the nerd tribes out there say. I don't give any living fucks. If you don't like the game, that's your opinion, you know? We all have our own opinion. I personally love this game. It's in my top 5 games of all time. I feel like this game is better than the first in every single aspect. But I'm also obsessed with the first one, too. So in this one, they kill the lead character off right in the fucking beginning. It's an epic ride after. They fixed the gunplay, the speed of the gameplay, the action. The story is one of the best in any game ever. You play as Ellie. She is a teenager. She is the only person in the world with a zombie cure. She is badass in every meaning of the word. Like, you feel like a freaking boss as you mow through enemies and zombies. The only thing I didn't care for was the ending, but that's for another time. Possibly, I'm going to do a future full review of the series, and we'll talk about that more in depth. But for now, that was the only thing I didn't like was the ending. But who cares? Still a great game. Next, we got the Xbox One, which released same year, 2013, right after the PS4, right around the same time. This system to me is flawless. The only knock I've ever had on Xbox was, other than Forza, the exclusives are dookie butter, like straight up dookie butter. Like we have, Gears of War, which is so overrated. Halo, in my opinion, is overrated. Gonna get a lot of hate for that, I guess. But yeah, Forza is the only exclusive I like. Like, to me, PS5 or PlayStation had the best exclusives forever now. So my number one game for Xbox One was Assassin's Creed Origins. I love Egypt. Has there ever been a cooler place in the world than old school Egypt? I think not. This game for me has the single greatest atmosphere I've ever witnessed. You can climb to the top of the Great Pyramids. You can visit every beautiful Egyptian city, and every city looks different than the last. This game had a huge map, amazing quests with a fantastic storyline. This game, 10 out of 10. I'm probably one of the few people that don't give it a 10 out of 10. Just because you have the old school AC fans. But I like them both. I like old school Assassin's Creed and I like the new ones. Unless it's fucking Odyssey. I do not like Odyssey. Alright, so we're going to the last two systems. So we'll start with the PlayStation 5. This was released in 2020. Right in the middle of COVID, it released. So, this is the strongest video game system ever created. It's the size of a small building. Anybody that owns this knows this. It's huge. It stands like 2 feet upright. Maybe even more. It's been 3 years since release, and just recently you could finally find the system for sale in stores. Like, you couldn't find this for the first 2 years. You had to buy it off people, like in the streets on the marketplace, and you had to overpay $200 to get one, which I did my first time. The system took a big hit from the coronavirus outbreak. Like, they weren't producing them at all. They couldn't get all the parts because shipping was fucked up from the virus. But the system is so fast. Oh my God. It's beautiful how fast this thing runs. There is no loading screens. So my number one game for the PS5, there hasn't been a lot of exclusives yet, but for me it's Horizon Forbidden West. If you like story, if you like photorealistic graphics, if you like a strong female lead character, like a Lara Croft, if you like the future of civilization, then this game is for you. You battle in America in the very far future. Animals are now combined with machines, which makes for deadly enemies, but really cool looking. So picture like a robot mixed with a rhino or something like that, and it breathes fire. Like, it's just fucking cool. There's so many badass enemies in this. It's a huge open world game. It's the second game in the series. The first game was released on PS4, and that was a good one too. Last but not least, the system I will cover is the Xbox Series S and Series X. So basically, for those of you that don't know, the Series S is a really small, really fast console, but it has a small hard drive. You can only fit like 5 games on it. So you have to buy an expandable hard drive for it to get the best out of it. But it's really fast, and it's worth the money. But the Series X is fucking huge. It's the size of a PlayStation 5. Super fast, has good memory. I actually own a Series S. I own 2 Series S's right now. But I love them. For the price, you cannot beat them. So, my number one game for this, it just came out probably, I think, a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, is Starfield. Starfield, it's basically Fallout in space. This game has everything. Space travel, cool-looking enemies, a huge arsenal of weapons, lots of discovery. You can cook, you can loot anything in any area in the game. You could steal stuff if you want. Just don't fuck with the NPCs. Don't kill NPCs. It's a dumb thing to do. Unless they have something badass that you can't afford. Then go for it. This game had everything you look for in a Bethesda published game. It even has the funniest fuck glitches that Bethesda is known for. In one section of the game, I killed an enemy. So I killed him, I went to loot him, and he starts spinning on the ground like 100 miles an hour, like a fucking top. He was going too fast that I couldn't even loot him. But that's okay, I was rolling around laughing my little tight ass off because it was fucking hysterical. I recorded it too, I had to. Yeah. So this concludes my history of video games and my favorite games for each system. Honestly, this was a blast writing and recording this, and I hope all you gamers, listeners out there loved it. If you aren't a video game fan and you listened, I hope I made you a fan of video games. Like I always say, video games are great stress relievers, and they can help with your mental health. Like honestly, if I'm ever feeling down, it's late at night, I can't sleep, I'll pop on a game, you know what I mean? It helps me distress, and I love that about it. It's such an escape from reality. So anyways, follow me on Twitter at PetaJoe Podcast, all caps. Facebook, search Pita Joe Podcast, all caps and spaces after each word. Leave a star review if you're listening on Spotify. Please, please, please leave a review. It helps so much. Leave a review or follow on all of the apps you listen to this podcast on. So if you go to my Podbean, it'll show you all the apps it's available on. You can click on it and it'll take you right to my podcast. So until next time, my fellow listeners, stay positive, stay hopeful, stay positively hopeful. Goodbye, good night. You'll hear from me soon.